Boom. My brother Sincere, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. It's Monday, and we are here with a legend or two in the building. How you doing, my man?
Man,
I'm good, bro. Oh,
I'm,
me or him?
I'm excited. Slow down. Yo,
My bad.
this man is the original member and current president of the Rocksteady crew. He's
Yeah.
traveled the globe popularizing hip hop in places such as Paris and London. He won a Bessie Award in '92 for choreography and a Hip Hop Pioneer Award in '94 from The Source. He was nominated for an MTV Award on his collaboration with Wyclef.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank
No,
you for
no one
joining
really,
us.
it's funny. No one really shouts out the accolades because it's interesting because I've gotten some pretty cool awards. I even like for there's an award that I got a few years ago from the Hispanic Federation. I'm sorry. Oh God, the Hispanic Heritage Awards, which is like the top award you can win as a Latino. And it was at Kennedy Center, and that was like that was a pretty cool one. But you know, my recent flowers from Drink Champs was all right too.
Okay.
No doubt.
And let me ask you a question. Sincere,
Yes, sir.
were you a 5%er?
I was not. A lot of people ask me that, but
Okay.
no, I'm not. Actually, the name comes from the character of Nas in Belly. I don't know if you remember
Got you.
everything about him. That reminded me of me, so I ran with the name.
Okay, that's what's up.
No doubt. So we're going to take it all the way back and work our way up to what you got going on in 2023. For those who may not know, may have forgotten, where was Crazy Legs born and raised?
Born and raised in the Bronx. Yes. And because we were poor, we lived all around the Bronx. That means like a lot of evictions, you know?
Right. So for your teenage years growing up, take us back to some of your earliest hobbies, interests before getting into dancing.
Even before I was a teenager, I used to go to a boxing gym called Morris Park Athletic Club in Morris Park in the Bronx. And there was a brother by the name of Victor Pena, who's a longtime boxing coach. And he was a person, like I would say, sports-wise, that I first looked up to. So I used to go to boxing gym. There was a point where a lot of us in the community were going to go to the Junior Olympics. And since we were poor, it cost like $12 to $14 for registration. And I didn't have it. So everybody else went except for me. So, you know, I was like, well, I'll just stay breaking.
Right.
But also I played baseball. Like, it's weird because baseball and boxing were my first loves. But that costs money, you know, and you're growing up in the Bronx and you're in the hood and you don't have that loot and your mom is raising 6 kids, single parent. You ain't getting those extra activities. And where I lived, there was no YMCA, there was no Boys and Girls Club or anything like that. So my community center was literally the streets.
Very dope.
Word. How old were you when you fell in love with baseball?
I fell in love with baseball, and I would say I started watching baseball in '76, but in '77 when Reggie Jackson came over, then you had Thurman Munson and all these other people. That's, you know, like as a child, being from the Bronx, you know, it's a hometown team, and then you got nothing else to look up to in the hood, you know, and that's something that we all rallied around. It was at a time when little kids could go into bars. A little kid could go into a neighborhood bar and hang out with the adults and watch the baseball game. You know, so there was a bar on right on Van Ness Street in the Bronx called Lino's Tavern, which is kind of like the town. These people who moved over from Sicily, and it had like 2 rooms. You had the main bar area, but then in the back you had a little dining area. But if you knew what was going on, there's a bunch of wise guys back there. But at the same time, in the front room, it was just like this merging of Black, Latino, and Italian, which was very rare at that time because the Bronx was pretty much like the movie A Bronx Tale. So if you see that scene where you're trying to go from one area to the next, it's like, nah, you better come to a complete stop and then go all the way around to get to the other side. So a Bronx tale is pretty much like the kinds of areas that I lived in. You know, so it was Black and Puerto Rican, and then we had our beef with Irish, then we had our beef with Italian and Jewish people. So we were very different kind of like relationship for Black and Latinos in more specifically Black and Puerto Rican in the Bronx. It was very different because we shared the same beatdowns from the police. We all got arrested together. We were all poor together, and we all got chased out of neighborhoods together. So, you know, we were locked arm in arm during those times.
Gotcha. So
but to answer your question, baseball, handball, boxing, and then it turned into breaking because, you know, except for handball, all those other things cost money. And yeah, that was pretty much it.
So it's describe for us that scene in the 70s and 80s, the b-boy scene. For those who actually
it's dangerous. Like there's a lot of people believe that people used to dance to replace fighting, which is just some straight up bullshit. That's some fantasy land shit, you know. Because you know, back then it was super rough. Like even my introduction to Rocksteady crew, you know, they brought me to go rob somebody. And because it was so desolate and there's so many abandoned buildings and very few people walking on the street, we were very unsuccessful. There was no one there to rob. But that was kind of like my introduction to getting into Rocksteady, because the brothers who ran Rocksteady were notorious stick-up kids. And one of them actually became very notorious within the system, and his name rings bells. We're not going to get into that, but you know, he probably, you know, I don't want to blow that shit.
Before the Rocksteady crew, were you in any other crews prior to the Rocksteady?
Yeah, I was for a short while. I was in a crew called the Bronx Boys, and not that I really earned my way into it. It was kind of like, come on, shorty, you down, that kind of shit. I had to earn my way into Rocksteady, but you know, I was in other crews because I lived in Manhattan for several years, for like 4 years. And I became part of different crews that were kind of like, one was a b-boy crew called Rock City Rockers. And then the other crew was the Uptown Crazy crew, which was like a graffiti / gang crew. And because and that was mostly Latino, and you had a lot of original graffiti writers. I don't want to say original, but old school graffiti writers who were down, but they took me under their wing because I was like the talented kid that came from the Bronx, and I was better than the b-boys and b-girls, well, mostly b-boys in their neighborhood over in Washington Heights. So I was pretty protected, you know. And around that time in the Bronx and certain parts of the city, you had to move. If you wanted some fame, you had to move from area to area, and you were either stupid, connected, brave. You know, you had to be one of those things, or super talented, where they say, yo, this dude say, yo, blah, 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 you know, yo, come hang out with us, shorty. So it was very much like that. You couldn't really just walk through a neighborhood and just feel like you could go chill at a jam and you were going to be all right. Because more than likely, you know, either on the way in or on the way out, there's a very high possibility that, you know, one of the dudes, so you're going to get stuck up. Like there were parts of, like first time I went to this area around Creston and 183rd in the Bronx. This is a notorious stick-up kid hangout. And the only reason I was able to go in that area was because, you know, the brothers Jimmy Lee, Jimmy D, they're the founders of Rocksteady, but they were super well connected and respected by not just people in the hood, the streets, but also like Cold Crush Brothers and all these other, the crews knew, the rap groups knew who they were. Like the stick-up kids had a whole other reputation on the streets. And this is before, like, you know, number one, nobody bragged about their shit. You know, everyone was on the low. You know, we definitely have a whole take it to the grave mentality. At least where I came from, if you did dirt or knew of dirt, you just shut up, you know. I don't really know of any of my friends who ever became a snitch. So.
Word. So in these crews, in the b-boy crews, there were also stick-up kids, right? So it's like
predominantly stick-up kids.
Okay. So it was easy to find competition.
It was. Yeah. Well, competition was kind of like, if I heard you was dope and you was in another area, I don't know what you look like. I know your name. Maybe I heard you hung out like in some area and you be out there with your box, or you go pick up your shorty after school sometimes because you cut in class and you gonna go get your girl. You find out these things and you're like, yo, this dude's probably gonna be over here at that time. And like, yo, what's up? You Mr. Freeze, or where you break? Oh, you want to battle? You go right there. You go in the tenement building hallway. And for us in hip hop at that time, and this is before it was called hip hop, in order to protect your reputation, you had to put it on the line. And it's very different right now. Right now, in order to protect your reputation in hip hop, you're not trying to battle. I mean, look, you got people asking for a rematch on versus because that shit put a dent in the armor. You know? And yeah, so it was pretty much like that. But there were times, I almost got killed like maybe 2 times because going into certain neighborhoods and I wanted to go battle somebody, and I would say, wow, I've probably been shot at about 5 to 7 times.
Ooh.
Yeah, maybe I got 2 more lives left. Who knows?
Wow. Speaking of getting out there for fame, can you take us back to some of the places you used to frequent or some of the venues that were popular back in the day?
We used to go to a schoolyard called 129 Park, and I was very young, so I couldn't be up in the clubs. And when I got into the clubs, I was still young and shouldn't have been there in the first place. So I used to hang out over by Belmont Park in the Bronx, 129 Park in the Bronx, 118 Park in the Bronx. Bronx, I didn't really go to Bronx River too much. That's more like when I was a teenager. But we were definitely hanging out in the streets, and the way you got around was you hopped on the bus. And when I say hop on the bus, it wasn't going inside the bus. You were hanging off the back of the bus to go where you had to go, because we didn't have transportation money.
Right.
So for me, those places, and then there was a place called on Crotona Avenue called Mom and Pop's Disco. And Mom and Pop's Disco was a neighborhood spot. It wasn't a disco, but they built a DJ booth in the basement of this building that these 2 people, Mom and Pop, used to run. And they gave us a place to get down and do our thing. And that spot was predominantly Puerto Rican in that place I used to hang out with. The resident DJ was a brother named Little Angel. It was a Puerto Rican DJ, which I know a lot of people find hard to believe these days with the bullshit that be going on out here. So those kinds of places, super underground. There was a place called the Dungeon where I had my first battle and completely blew that shit. I was trash. I was straight trash, man. But it was, that was the first time, the first time other than boxing where I took, I was nervous and unsure of myself. It was my first time out there.
Right.
Yeah, and that's basically it. We would just, there was a lot of, it looked like a war zone back there. So it's not like we had much to go to. You were always looking for those, at the end of the day, let's say it's Friday night, you're listening or walking around the neighborhoods and waiting for that echo to kick in, because then it's like, oh shit, there's a jam. There's a jam over there. We got to go that direction, and that's how you found out.
Word. Like when you look in retrospect, when you look right behind us, you can bite somebody's style. You could take this from this person, take a little bit from that person. Yeah. But you guys being like the originators of this, how did you come up with your moves? Like, what was the inspiration to even come up with what you created?
The inspiration was literally to impress the dudes that were better than us. We had a great level of respect for the B-boys, they were only like 2 or 3 years older than us. But at that age, when you're 10 or 11 and someone is 14, that's a big difference. So we were looking up to those brothers and looking out for their respect. And you go there, and because everyone was real harsh, if you were like, yo, I got this move, dude be like, yo, shorty, that shit is trash. Or they would say like, no, the slang back then is like, yo, that's hurt. You need to put a Band-Aid over it or something. And then, you know, I'm like 10, 11 years old. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'll practice all week. Come back with some new shit by the time I see them on the weekend. And they saw my progression. And that's how I started to get my respect. But we took harsh criticism, and there was none of this soft shit, you know, like nobody like, oh man, I'm just trying to express myself. You know, we literally were taking harsh criticism, but that's the environment we lived in. We lived around gangs. We lived around stick-up kids. Nobody was sweet talking you to try to make you feel better about yourself.
Word.
You talked a little bit about wanting to impress the older guys. Who are you looking up to? Who was inspiring you while you were breaking earlier on?
There was a brother by the name of B-Boy Spy. Real dark-skinned brother, big afro, used to wear his hat to the side like this, and his afro poofing out. And B-Boy Spy was part of a crew called the Crazy Commanders. And Spy's pretty notorious too, and he's actually in the system now under a different name. But he's kind of running a massive organization right now. But you know, Spy was that dude. Called him the man with 1,000 moves. And did he have 1,000 moves? No, hell no. But he did it. He danced ambidextrous. So he could do something one way, transition, do it the other way. And it's like, oh shit, like, you know, who goes, you know, both directions with their footwork? So for us, since everything was super remedial back then, that just blows your mind. It's like someone could do what could be considered a foundational move right now and do it on both sides back then. And, you know, I don't know if you know, or the audience knows what a chair freeze is, but it's a basic move. And the first time we saw him do that, and the whole place just blew up. There's no spinning, no nothing, something super basic, but he was the evolution. If there was a style of breaking that is still done to this day, because there was an African American style, and then there was a Latino influence as well. Although we rocked together, the Latino influence remained the primary style because of six-step footwork. B-Boy Spy made it up. Moves like the swipe. You know, there's a bunch of moves that Spy made up, and you know, I would say on the street level, he was my first superhero. Like, wow. Again, notorious dude.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
Speaking of 100 styles, I understand that you created the windmill by accident.
Yes.
What? Explain that. Like, how did that even come together?
I was so first there was a backspin, you know, very slow backspin that people used to do. You kind of tuck your arm. You didn't plant and then whip your legs around and ball up, you know? So I accidentally created what's called the whip backspin, which is a really fast backspin. And then you could come out of that into different moves. So when I did that, I was practicing a lot. Like, we were practicing every day. No one had to tell us to practice. We were for us being so wild ass motherfuckers, we were super disciplined with our art, you know? And the whole idea was like, you practice so much, like, you know, you're going to stumble upon something by accident, come up with ideas. If you're with the right person, they're going to see some shit that you don't see, and they're going to tell you, yo, do that again. So that was my situation. Did that backspin. But then one day I over rotated coming out of it. And then I went back into it again, which formed at that time, it was called the continuous backspin. And then later on, when we started traveling, since we were one of the few people dancing at the time, we were kind of like putting on other people throughout the boroughs. And when we started touring and that continuous backspin came out, people who didn't know us and didn't know the vocabulary of the moves, they started calling it windmill. So that's how it became the windmill. But the original name is the continuous backspin. And it was an accident, you know? But like I say, it was my accident.
That's dope.
And here's, just to clear something up, because you'll have people who say, oh, people have been breaking since hundreds of years ago. Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, we're people of color. We move to the beat a certain way. That's just how we respond. Right? We're always going to do that. But when people talk about similarities and moves from the past, whether it's something similar to capoeira from Angola or Brazil, whatever, it's all done in different contexts. Capoeira is its own thing. You know, other courtship dances from Africa and all those, and the Caribbean, those are all different, done with different intention, different rhythms. Some of them are 3/3 when we're a 4/4. You know, in hip hop, we rock off of 4/4. So people have to understand that within the hip hop context, I don't give a fuck if they saw what I do being done 200 years ago. Within hip hop, this shit is mine. You know, you know. So I think a lot of people are trying to stake a claim in terms of like there's this divide between I don't even want to name the groups because it's some bullshit. But it's a divide that doesn't make sense because, you know, for me growing up, all I know is rocking, you know, with Black and Latino people, and that's it. That's my experience. And we were so young. Hip hop back then, and I had a really long conversation with Melly Mel 2 weeks ago. We went on for like an hour and a half, and we were trying to understand why people are trying to divide and say that Puerto Ricans weren't there, Latinos weren't there. And the thing is that there was no need for us to identify each other like that. Little kids do not identify each other like that in the hood. You know, and people don't understand that. So when you're looking at like let's say my dude B-Boy Spy was your complexion, dark. Well, a lot of people saw him in the hood like, oh, he's black. He's Puerto Rican. Does he have black in him? Of course, we all do, you know? So, but no one needed to say Spy was Puerto Rican or black. It didn't matter because the thing about hip hop was it was the game changer because we could connect just on the simple fact that, yo, that rhyme you kicked was dope. Yo, that move you did was dope. Can you show me how to do that? Word. Next thing you know, you breaking bread together. You doing stick ups together. But and you know, and don't get me wrong, that's not to glorify any of the fucked up shit we did, you know. And I'm not saying I'm some notorious move maker in the streets like that. I did my little bit of dirt, you know, but that was the environment. You know, people fought just because it's like, damn, it's like if I don't fight, I'm gonna be punked everywhere I go. So you always have to represent. But you know, but the whole discussion of whether Black and Latinos are there, anyone who was actually there and doesn't have an axe to grind, isn't bitter, is going to give a real story. I've met people who are completely dark-skinned and didn't know that they were Puerto Rican until recently because they were a love child, you know, and Mom Dukes got with, you know, Jose down the block, you know, and Jose's dark and Mom is dark. So and then next thing you know, years later, you're like, why does everyone else in my family speak Spanish and I don't? And that happened to one of the pioneers. Wow. You know? And to be honest, I know some pretty big names right now that would blow your mind who are not even talking about that they're half Puerto Rican or Dominican because they don't know how the Black community is going to respond to them. You know, so they don't want to be, I don't know if it's persecuted for not speaking about it sooner or understanding how to roll that out and show their pride. But I know of some pretty big names that will blow your mind. And there's a lot of people who are celebrating them as one thing and not everything that they are.
Right.
Definitely.
About 40 years ago, you appeared in the movie Wild Style. Can you take us back to that process?
Thanks, man. Yeah. So what was the question?
Just the early process of getting that call, getting that conversation. What do you remember most about going into the movie Wild Style and the script, just everything going into that movie?
Man, honestly, bro, when we were asked to do that, we were like, yo, we're gonna be in a movie, like, but did we appreciate it? No. Did we want to be in the movie industry? Not at all. We didn't give a shit. Um, I definitely had zero appreciation for what was going on. We were definitely, on the set bugging out, wilding out, showing, and a lot of people on that set high as fuck. Like when you see the scenes in Wild Style and they smoking.
They smoking.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah,
weren't
there was no props back then. If you see beer in the shot, it's beer. So, I think I appreciate Wild Style more now than I did back then. Back then, it was kind of like just a show off thing.
Mhm.
But in terms of what it represents to us as a people, culturally, I understand the importance of it. And I think that movie, for me, if we're looking at Wild Style, Beat Street, Crush Groove, Breakin' 2, I'm rocking with Wild Style all day. And that probably had the worst acting out of all the movies. But anyone that was in Wild Style was actually a top tier person in the streets, because there was no commercial, real big industry at all back then. So you actually had to be a top tier person to be invited. There were no, and the dope shit about Wild Style is that although it was the first movie, the good thing is that there was no record label involved. So that meant that there is no one saying, well, I need to make sure I get my artist on there, even though your artist is trash, or, you're going to use this as a promo opportunity for your artist. Nah, you had to be legit talented if you were if you were invited into Wild Style.
Dope.
Okay. How did they go about the casting for that one? Because I did.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
For Wild Style, like because like the breaking movies, like it varies. You got like actors breaking, and then you got breakers breaking. So like, what was that process like?
I would say, I wasn't part of that process, but I do know that there was scouting done at jams. Like these people went to jams. Even when we ended up in Flashdance, the producers came to the Roxy. They wanted one person, but then they saw all of us, and then they just had us be part of it. We didn't audition. And speaking of Flashdance, come here, Freeze.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Freeze.
And let me just introduce Mr. Freeze over here. Mr. Freeze is chilling in the background. Mr. Freeze was also in Flashdance and Wild Style, so maybe he has something to add because I think he got high less than us. So he remembers more. Do you remember how we got into Wild Style?
I don't remember how we got into Wild Style, but I remember when we were in a dance studio on Broadway, we were all sitting down, and our manager at the time, Ruza Blue, she was explaining how she has a friend at Paramount Pictures, and they were looking for they're doing a movie on dance. The storyline was dance, and they wanted something unique and different. And at the time, the world really hasn't seen B-boys other than maybe Buffalo Gals, if you watched those types of videos from back then. And it was like it was yesterday. I remember her talking to us and saying, "There's a movie, there's a producer, and they want you guys in the movie." And all of us were like, "No, we're not doing that." Because back then, the way we thought was, if the world sees us break, everyone's gonna bite. That was the way we thought. And she explained to us that it would be great. And on top of that, we're each getting paid, let's say $1,000. And we were all like, okay, we'll do it.
Yeah. And let's be clear. He was the one worried about people stealing our moves, and he made a big stink about it. And Freeze was always the one to like speak up. And why do I hear whistling going on here?
That's an ambulance.
Oh. So anyway, I ran the crew. but there, you know, everyone had an opinion. So, you know, doing Flashdance, you know, even though I learned this much later in life, because in the late 80s, after our hiatus, my boy Jerry Fontanez was just like, yo, Rocksteady from the 90s, what's up? And I was like, nah, man, you know, people, what am I gonna do? Battle people who are doing my moves? You know, and he's like, Legs, stop worrying about that shit. You have to remember you did something that went around the world. You need to be flattered about that. And I, you know, from that point on, I had a different perspective on biting, because if you know, if you do something well enough and it becomes the nature of the foundation of the dance, or another part of the foundational vocabulary of the dance, you've contributed something that's long term, and it's really no longer something that you could claim as yours, as a possession. You know, it's the world's now, it's the culture, it's the people. So, you know, I stopped being a little bitch ass about that. I was like, all right, whatever. I guess I gotta practice more now, make up some other shit.
Right.
Yeah.
I never stopped bitching about it. He had, you know, let me say this for him, because he's not one to speak on it. He has an innate ability ever since the movie came out. The movie itself went throughout the world, yes, and everyone saw it firsthand through it. But it's interesting because of the people he met and the way he is. His lifestyle is generally strictly just a culture. Myself, of course, I was in the crew, very excited. You know, we were doing things, we were doing shows, but after a while, a lot of us, you know, went our own separate directions. And the reason why is because we started to look at things in a way where, let's do a show. Can we make money? How do we do this? How do we do that? So a lot of us were veering off in directions where we were looking at it no longer as our lifestyle, and it became the hope of a business, which was a crazy struggle. Legs had kept it in the format where this is just the way I live. I'm not trying to do anything. It just is happening. I'm not saying that's what he said, but over the years, you know, I'm 60. I know him for a very long time, since we were kids. It's interesting to sit back and watch his journey and what he's accomplished without really trying to do anything. People just seeked him out.
He's basically saying, I have nothing to offer until someone comes to me.
No, this culture has continued because of you.
When did you embrace it, right? Because like we're talking about what? Wild Style, Style Wars, David Letterman show. Like, were you still hesitant at that point? And I know with you guys getting older and probably needing and wanting money, bills coming into the equation, you're probably looking at it more as a business. Like, you know, I need to make some coin off of this. But like, were you still not embracing it when you were on the Letterman show? Like, that's big. You know what I'm saying?
Nah, man. We you know, again, it wasn't an industry that we were chasing. We were truly living it, and we were thrown into an industry that we weren't nurtured for. So we just weren't prepared, and we did some wild shit on the road. You know, we were doing wild shit when we came off the road. You know, being and you know, robbing people and doing all kinds of shit. It's not like, yeah. I mean, but you know, it's not like we were caking up out there. A lot of people think we were caking up, and we got robbed a lot by promoters in other countries. You know, there was this one time, and like, damn, we were on tour. We were gonna make $120,000 on this tour. It was 1984, and I mean, 120,000 now is a whole hell of a lot more, you know. And we got 60,000 up front, and then by the time we were doing the last show at a big arena, we were supposed to be paid another 60 right after that. Dude just jetted. I'll never forget his name. His name was Hoss.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know, when you think about it, I was 18, so the oldest person was 19, and then the youngest person was maybe 16, 15. So some white dude just robbed a bunch of kids.
Kids.
You know, And then to have to go through litigation with Virgin Records and all that stuff. It was wild, and I don't know. I honestly, I think anyone else would have been stressed out over having to go through litigation with Richard Branson. You know who Richard Branson is, right?
Oh yeah.
He owns Virgin everything, and but I think our representation was people who were representing us were more concerned about it than we were, because again, we didn't set out for that; we were thrown into it.
Right. While we're on the subject of movies, still, Freeze, take us back to the umbrella scene.
Well, the umbrella scene was interesting, and I need to say this before I explain why I did it in the movie. There was a gentleman named John Christian, and he's a brother from the Lockatrons out of Brooklyn, and I saw him years ago.
Years before.
Excuse me. I saw him a couple of years before in the United States of America. He had a glittery suit on, and he was doing the boogie, is what we called it at that time.
Boogie.
He's doing the boogie, and he took out an umbrella, and he walked against the wind, much like I did in Flashdance, and then he did the backslide.
So he's a biter.
So let me get, there's a difference. So when I saw that, I'm like, John, that shit is unbelievable. Yo, do you mind if I use that? And he's like, well, I didn't make it up. I'm like, to me, you did. Can I use that one day? So, of course, fast forward, we did the Buffalo Gals video. I did the umbrella in there. And then Flashdance came. So I remember we got called into, this was in Pittsburgh, I believe, where we did the movie.
Pittsburgh.
Nobody has seen Breaking at that time.
Hell
just
no.
so you know, nobody has seen it. They call us to where there's this huge tent and everybody's eating, the whole production team. So we throw on Just Begun, we have a little cassette, and we start, doing our thing. I remember this part for me because people were screaming because, visually the backslide with the umbrella was pretty amazing when you see it for the first time. So I remember doing it, and you could feel the energy of the room, everyone going, whoa. And Legs came right after me, and he started doing swipes, backspin to a freeze, and everybody erupted and went bananas again because they never saw it. So we fast forward now to on Broadway when they're showing the premiere. We're watching the movie, we're all sitting down, and all of a sudden the scene hits. And just thinking about it, I remember when I was a kid, we got so open. You see, Normski came out, I came out, Legs came out, Kenny came out, and we were like, yo, this is him, this is him.
Frosty Freeze.
Frosty Freeze came out, and of course he did his iconic final move where he jumped on his back and
suicide,
did the goodbye. And it was amazing. And at the end of the movie, the press came to us. They did not go to Jennifer Beals. And I remember this, Jennifer Beals, when we met her on the set, she clearly, just wasn't interested in meeting us. And I could understand. She probably felt like, what are these guys? And when the press came to us, I guess her publicist or something was like pushing her to come in. And we remembered that she wasn't wanting to say hello to us. So
he remembers. I don't remember shit.
No, there was a couple of us that remembered, especially me. And I'm like, just let her in. And she got in the middle and we took pictures. And that was like, we felt like superstars after that. It was one of the most amazing things we've ever done.
Yeah.
And again, because of his lifestyle, he met the person that seeked him out. And again, why we've gotten to these steps to the movie, to it being known throughout the world.
Word. Legs, how was it doubling for Jennifer Beal?
Very uncomfortable.
No, it wasn't.
For me, you weren't there. Doubling.
You're used to wearing tights.
So we just happened to be in LA for what was the first show to ever be done, first hip hop show to ever be done in LA. Actually, it was more in Anaheim. So LA actually didn't get the first hip hop show. They may have gotten a rap show, but in terms of all the elements, it was the first one was done in Anaheim. I think a place called Skate Country. And they heard we were there, and they said, hey, like, can you come down and teach the two stunt girls, the French girl and the gymnast, how to do this backspin? I'm like, well, it's not going to get it in a day. That's impossible. I'll try. And so we get into a studio. I'm teaching them, and actors and athletes, everyone's going to try extra hard. They're going to try to nail the part down, And they came in with a lot, like, really big bruises on their body the next day. And Adrian Lyon, the director, who really became a famous director after, he was just like, hey, can you dress a certain way and do this? And, I was just growing my mustache. So you talking about a 16, 17-year-old Puerto Rican kid from the Bronx living in the hood, getting his part of his manhood in on his face. Like, that's a violation right there. No one's trying to shave at that age immediately. You still trying to get liquor. You know what I mean? You're like, oh shit, now I can get liquor underage or some shit like that. And I was just like arrogant. I was like, yo, man, you gotta pay me. And then they wanted me to, they wanted me to shave everything and all this other stuff. And yeah, I was just like, oh man, I'm gonna do it. I did it. It was not comfortable at all. I wasn't happy about it, but I got a whole bunch of residual checks after that for decades.
Look at checks.
Yeah.
You talked about that tour earlier on. Was that the New York City rap tour where you guys got jerked for the 60, or was that something different? Okay. No, can you talk a little bit about that and going to Paris and London and what you were witnessing over there?
Well, Freeze was also with us. There was number one, we felt the racism in the air. I don't know if he felt it, but he because there was this one issue where it was this group called the Fantastic Four. They were the also known as the McDonald's Double Dutch Girls. So it was four sisters who were champion Double Dutch team, and when they were performing, a couple of people threw some bottles of cans up on the stage while the girls are doing their thing. And now you had myself, Dondi, Futura, Mr. Freeze. Were you there for that? Or you left?
Yeah, I was there.
Mr. Freeze, Take One, Frosty Freeze, Fat Five Freddy, Ramelzi, Grammix and DST, whole bunch of people. And we're wild. So Dondi and Futura led the way. They saw who, threw this stuff at the girls. So we had belt buckles with our names on them. So they were big. So whoever had that wrapped up, around their fist. And then if you didn't have that, we had spray cans. So a couple of dudes go down into the stage and beat the shit out of the people who threw the stuff on the stage at the sisters. And when they got back on stage, we're all like squared off on stage. We're just standing there and people are just looking up. And then all of a sudden it's like, they applauded us for beating these people down.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And actually, he has a funny story because he quit the tour.
I'm just a little bitch.
Hold on. Wait, quit and went back?
Everything.
You quit and went back?
Huh?
Quit and went back home?
Yeah, in the middle of the tour.
I left the tour. No, it was almost the end.
Whatever. For us, it felt like it was the middle because it was a short tour. But there was a fight between Ken Swift and Frosty Freeze in a hotel room.
And I still have the scar.
And Ken Swift threw an ashtray that was pointed 4 corners at Frosty Freeze. And did he duck?
He threw it, ducked, it broke in half, and it spun and
went
into my thigh. I still have the scar. It was deep.
Yeah. So he got pissed off, and I think he hated all of us after that point. We were pretty disruptive in that we were. Shut up the lights in the hotel. we were flooding people's rooms. We were having like little wars, like crew against crew, and got, I don't know if we got kicked out of the hotel, but it got to a point where the guy that we hired for security, he said, you were there, right? He says, you, me, and Frosty Freeze on the bed. And I was 17. I was 17 at the time. And we're sitting, our backs up against the headboard. And we're just looking like little teenagers there with our legs straight on the bed, like we're about to be punished. And this dude goes, and he was black, Willie Kraft. He points at all of us. And this, the ironic thing is he's black, Frosty Freeze is black, I'm Puerto Rican, whatever. So he goes, you fucking spick, you fucking nigger, you fucking, what did he call you? I don't know what he called you. I don't know if he had anything for him. But yeah, so we caused a big problem on the tour, man. So we were threatened by our own security because even our tutors that were on the road with us,
I'll never forget that name.
they were all quitting on us. The tutors didn't want to stay with us. We was wild. We were wild, man. I mean, if you look at all of us, we all came from super dysfunctional homes. So when you're talking about like the ghetto trauma mixed in with, survival, being poor and fighting your way through life, and it's like my girl says, she's like, damn, man, like you had to learn how to fight before you could learn how to be a man. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much because we had to fight as little kids, So sometimes you got jumped. And when you're thinking about the psychotic shit that you're taught in the hood, you get into a fight, you're looking at somebody telling you, yo, stomp his head out. And that was the thing. That was the go-to if you were in the hood. You got into a fight, you better get him on the floor and stomp his head out. That is some sick fucking shit that we were doing. And I hate to say that I actually did that, because it also reminds me of what I'm capable of. And that's not cool, I don't celebrate that shit, that the fact that we had to live and survive like that and do fucked up shit to each other. So you put those people on tour, it's a fucking problem. We're going through checkpoints, military checkpoints, where our managers like, whatever drugs you guys got on you, you better fucking do them now, or you better get rid of them, blah, 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 because they're all going to come on here right now and you're all going to get arrested. They were always threatening us. We had like 30 people on a plane to Japan, and they told us that the police were waiting for us when we got off the plane because me and one of the other people went and picked up some product, and we knew there was going to be like 30 people on the Wild Style tour. We turned the plane into a spot, and we had a little distribution business going on. There was a lot of action happening in the bathrooms. The whole fucking plane smelled like weed, and this is when smoking was still allowed in the plane. So yeah, I mean, we were doing dumb shit. I mean, that's a federal crime right there.
Right. In Paris, when we were touring France, I mean, the reason we got agitated a lot because it was very difficult. We'd get up at 4 a.m. Security would wake us, and sometimes we just didn't want to get up. And Frosty would be like, "No, man, look that. I don't want to get up." And they would like grab us and dress us, and we would be up very early. Sometimes we wouldn't have something to eat right away. We'd get on a regular school bus. And we would travel 10 hours to Metz, France, to Lyon. And then once we're done with the show, we would sign something. We'd get like 500 or 600 francs. We'd spend.
Now, we only made $500 on that tour.
So we made very little money, and we would spend it on sweatsuits. But then we would take a drive back to the hotel. So it never went from the hotel to one place. Then we would do a 3-hour ride to another. We had to keep going back and forth. It was extremely tiring and, for me, super frustrating.
And we were arguing and fighting with each other.
That's what made it.
But we did that. No, but we did that over here anyway. That was just another day for us. We had so many internal fights in Rocksteady. And then, but the beauty of it is like, that was the time when you throw joints and then after you smoke joints. And it's like you smoking with the same dude you punched in the face or beat you down. and they're telling you, man, you know, yeah, I beat you up, but I respect you, man. Oh, here, smoke this.
Right.
Dysfunction at its finest. 1984.
Well
Beat Street.
said. Yep.
Radon Chong. That battle scene.
I made out with Ray Don Chung once.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did during
Don't
that.
get to that after.
Huh?
Backspin. What made you take off your shoes? Like, how many takes were you just freestyling and trying to figure out something to get everybody to ooh on?
It was so we filmed the battle scene, and they were like, hey, we need to get this last move. So they had me and Kenny versus, I think, Chino and Pex. And then we went a few rounds, and they were like, all right, cool. We're going to have Crazy Legs versus, I think, Pex. And then they had me and Pex going at each other for like 3 rounds. And it's crazy because we were young, so we had mad stamina. Shit, I'll die doing 3 rounds right now. But I told Buck, no, actually, first of all, I had tried to move like a while back, maybe a year before. And I told Buck 4, I'm like, yo, cover me. So I started untying my laces, and I told him, yo, and Buck 4 was my best friend. I said, yo, cover me. I'm going to try something. So I untied my laces, and I just did it. I did it. And it could have gotten wrong because my sneakers could have flown off. I was on acid, so many things that could have gone wrong, but it worked out. And that's how they closed out the film. But we actually had a real battle 2 weeks after that.
Okay.
We smoked the shit out of it.
And the difference in battling between nowadays and back then is completely different. Now a lot of b-boys, and they're magnificent. It's not to take anything against them, away from them. They pretty much choreograph particular moves and combinations that when we were doing things, although a lot of us were practicing at Jerry Fontanez's studio or something, when we were in that cypher, that music made us feel a certain way. And sometimes, perfect example with what he did, I'm sure it wasn't practice, but he felt a certain way. It moved him a certain way. There was the right intimate crowd, and he hit it. It just came from what he felt.
Yeah.
And that's what a real b-boy is. You don't know what you're going to do when you go down.
I actually never did that move again until like 10 years later.
Really?
Yeah. So we were at an event in, I don't know if it was San Diego. And, we were not on our home turf. And we were battling 2 crews at the same time. And I felt like, all right, cool. They got the crowd automatically. So I needed to manipulate the situation. So when someone else would go down, as the crowd would start clapping, I would distract the crowd and be like, all right, move back. So that the other crew wouldn't get any applause. So I would distract the crowd like that. And then I was like, all right, fuck it, man. I'm going to try this shit because, no matter if they don't like us or not, they all watch Beat Street. So I did the move again that one time, and it worked out, and it shut down the whole crowd. So that was pretty dope.
That's lit.
So,
all right. Back to Ray. You got to go back to Ray. You can't just. So, like, back to Ray. Did you guys, or was that just a little movie romance, or what happened?
I don't honestly, man. I think I was just trying to smash somehow,
Word.
And, I'm 17. I'm meeting this cutie. I'm kicking it to her, but I didn't really have access to her outside of the set. We made out once, I think, outside the Roxy while filming, and we never really hung out, But I've always had a great deal of respect for her. She's a sweetheart. When I look back on it, meeting her and meeting Harry Belafonte was pretty cool. There was, something with Harry Belafonte always stuck with me because, I grew up thinking like, yeah, we need to get money. We were desperate for money. So Harry Belafonte had a ring that had LM on that. And I was like, yo, Harry, what does that mean? Love money? He was like, no, love many. I said, ooh.
Ask a question. Who is Ray?
Ray Don Chung.
When you guys were talking about
Things I
Ray,
made out with a dude.
I'm giggling. I was wondering, like,
Ray made out? What the fuck? I didn't say anything. All right, now I got it. Thank you for picking that up.
Thank you. Yeah.
I didn't know what the fuck you guys were talking about. Ray?
At the top of the interview, Joe went over a few. Joe went over a few of your accolades. At this time, we want to acknowledge those and talk a little bit about them. 91, you appeared in So What Happens Now? Was that the first hip hop mainstream stage show?
Yeah, that was actually an off Broadway show. So What Happens Now was pretty much a play that was based on some of the dealings that we had in the streets and stuff like that. And unfortunately, the downside of Flashdance was that if you look at almost every movie that was made about hip hop, there was always some bullshit ass ballerina aspect of it that was so far from our reality, you know. And you know, that same theme was done again. And I always felt like when we did shit like that, we're trying to appeal to an audience that should be trying to understand us instead of us catering to them. You know, when we go to a Broadway show and we see Phantom of the Opera, they're not doing shit where it's like, hey, these blacks and Puerto Ricans are coming down, you know, let's make it easy for them to understand. Nah, they do that shit and we got to figure it out. And ever since that, I don't want to do shit that's easy for them to understand. We don't need to be doing dummy-proof music because they're too ignorant to want to understand, you know, what we're doing as a people.
Right. 92, you won the Bestie Award for choreography. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that was presented to rhythm technicians and rocksteady crew. So that was you know, I don't want to take the credit away from the other people. That was for two groups for some of our new works that we were doing theater-wise and choreography and all that stuff. So yeah, I can't take full credit for that. You know, shout out to everybody else who deserves that. You know,
no doubt.
I don't like taking false props. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that will be like they say, oh yeah, founder of Rocksteady Crew. No, I didn't found Rocksteady Crew. It was given to me. You know, it sounds good, but nah, it was passed on to me.
And he made it what it is today.
Absolutely. You were honored as the godfather of the 2003 Jersey City Puerto Rican Day Parade. Take us back to that moment.
Oh man, oh shit. So when I was honored with that, I was playing baseball at the time up in the Bronx, and actually, sorry, a softball league. It was a fast pitch softball league, and I had pulled my calf muscle, and I never let it heal properly. So when I did that parade in Jersey City, I actually tore my Achilles tendon right in the middle of the parade, dancing on the street. So when it popped, and when that shit pops, you feel it go through your whole body. It's a pain that's like, and it's fast and indescribable, but you feel it impact your whole body. And my two boys were next to me, and I was like, yo, boom. You know how James Brown walks off the stage when he's sweating and all that shit? Get me to the float now. I can't feel my foot. So we started doing the James Brown shit, and I get back, I sit down, and my foot is just dangling. It's dangling. And I'm telling people I'm trying to sound like, hey, check this out. Like, make sure there's an ambulance waiting for me at the end of the parade. I have to go to the hospital right now. And yeah, so they took me to the hospital as soon as it finished.
Wow.
Injuries had to be a dime a dozen, especially like back in the early days, y'all starting out. Folks wasn't carrying cardboard with them, right? Like it was concrete.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was definitely concrete. Yeah, we would get those, you know, like when you're playing baseball, you slide and you get those strawberries. You know, they used to call them strawberries, but we would have that all over our bodies, on our elbows, wrists, knees, hips. Yeah, I've had 7 surgeries,
all relate to breaking?
Baseball, breaking, and then I had a broken jaw from when I had got jumped. So that was another thing.
That was
The cardboard era came out when people started to do more of the spinnings. Ourselves, we ended up wearing Le Tigre, like the rain pullovers. So we had a bit of a different
The windbreakers.
the windbreaker take on it, so that we could still be doing things rough and rugged on concrete and still spin, rather than just taking cardboard and carrying it with us to battles.
I mean, when you're young and you weigh a buck and change, you ain't really worried about, being too heavy on the floor. You're gonna heal in like 3 days. Working out, you fart, you get abs, just for farting and shit like that. So the thing with just to the cardboard comment, there was a place right next door to where we practiced. There was a park called Rocksteady that we called Rocksteady Park, but then eventually the New York City Parks Department also labeled it as Rocksteady Park. And there was an appliance store right next door to the park. We used to practice under the swings where they had the rubber mats. But in the summer, the rubber mats would beat up and dirty your clothes. So we would take the cardboard from the appliances that they threw out after they took the appliances out, and that's how the whole cardboard thing started to happen. A lot of people thought that we would walk around with cardboard, but no, that was just for practice. I've never battled somebody on cardboard that I could remember. Right. That was just practice, and we were poor. So if you got your gear dirty, number one, you ain't gonna look fresh. Number two, your mom's gonna be pissed. So we got the cardboard.
Word.
And you figure we were that was 1981. So I was 13 when we started doing that.
He just had his bar mitzvah.
Crazy.
Oh man.
So many achievements that we could be here all night, but I'll just touch on a few more. The dance program in the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
Can you touch on that a little bit?
So a lot of my friends had died, and my best friend was murdered, execution style. He was tortured and executed. And there was just so much bullshit going on, and it got to a point when that shit hit me hard, and I found myself ready. I'm finding myself on a stakeout, with somebody, and it's like, all right, well, you know what? Fuck this. So many people have died, and this ain't me. I don't want to do this. I knew that the only dirt that I've done was because we were hungry, and we were trying to eat. Or trying to look fresh because we had nothing. I never wanted to be involved with another level of war. And I found myself ready to be in that direction. And the next day, I just walked away from everything. And I realized, like, okay, I got a tool, I got an art form. So I decided to find the worst place in New York City where kids were most likely to end up dealing drugs, get shot, drop out of school, dysfunctional homes, domestic violence, all those things. And this is me as a dysfunctional person myself. So I'm thinking, how can I help while I'm still fucked up? So I decided to volunteer for 3 days a week for 3 years, and I worked with these kids where we took over. Well, first I started teaching them, and that was wild right there, because I was basically teaching the same version of ourselves when we were kids. So I gotta talk to these kids like they're grown men. Like, yo, what are you doing? Like, yo, get over it. And, like I'm speaking aggressively to them because that's all they understood. So dealing with them, I gotta make examples out of them, be like, yo, you're out of the program. And I knew if I picked like the wildest person when he acted up, who was talented and really loved breaking, that everyone else would fall in line. So I would create a punishment, keep them away, and then bring them back into a leadership position to keep everyone else in check. So we started doing that. We started doing fundraisers for the Point Community Development Corporation in the Bronx and raising money for them. I started I started throwing food drives. I did food drives for like 15 years, 20 years. And then I would also take them to basketball games, a circus. We took over a club called Wetlands where I had kids ages from like maybe 8, 9 to 15 run the whole club. We had a dance competition, we had DJs. But I had them work the merch, I had them work the box office, everything related to the absolute control of the club, they ran. So, and that was just to give them a sense of empowerment, or like, oh, you could do this shit too, you know. And I would like buy all the merch for them. You know, I would fund it and just say, you got to work this now. This is yours. Let me see you work it. And they got creative, you know, started making their own signs. And these are little wild out kids. And the thing about that is that those kids, you know, you do something at the time and you hope you have an impact. But those kids called me, I would say like within the same year, about 10 years ago, 3 of them called me in the same year. And each one of them called me to tell me that I saved their lives, you know. And yo, I cried so hard each time that happened, because you think like, holy shit, man, I've done some fucked up shit in my life and I've actually saved their lives. And when you grow up where we grew up, you don't realize the damage that's being done when you're that young, and then to have some sort of impact to save some lives, and when they're full-grown men, not being prompted by anyone else to call me, and they're just sitting there thinking like about their lives and what got them to where they are. I said, all right, cool. Well, that's good for balance for me in my life, you know. But it also means that I did something good, and that means a lot to me.
Beautiful.
Word.
Now in mid 2000s, you gave up competing. At what point did you know that it was that time to retire?
Man, too many injuries, too old for this shit, you know? And you know, it's weird because in my later years, I would say I was more successful when I was dancing less, you know? And, you know, you can only live in denial for so long, you know, whether it's physically or mentally. And, you know, different stages of my life, you know, there are different points in my life where physical shit had to slow down, you know, and even in order for me to train for my last battle, I barely danced until 2 weeks before the battle. I mostly boxed just to get into shape, because number one, I was already tired of dancing like that and preparing for that. I wasn't inspired. Yeah, so, you know, and I actually did that battle injured. I was injured. If you look at that battle, it was in Russia. I have a wristband over a brace. So I had a cyst in my wrist. I didn't want anyone to know, but I was all fucked up that day.
Wow.
But you know, we don't go out like that. You know what I mean? We're not making excuses.
No doubt.
That's what's
However,
up.
had he have battled and there would have been a closer cipher with other B-boys, I feel that by him battling the way he did, it was more of a show for the people,
Yeah,
rather than his own element of feeding off the music and the people in the cipher. Because when I saw it, I wasn't very happy. I'm like, this is, you know, it's a show, it's a spectacle.
yeah. Well,
He does his best work when it's a real cipher with people interacting with each other and feeding off each other.
there like, so here's the thing with breaking. Breaking like rap, you have people who would like to believe that they know how to freestyle, because the whole word idea of freestyle means something completely different than the actual definition that it originated from. I would be more like, you know, if I were to say my dance style is referenced after, if I were to compare it to an MC, I'm a Craig G or I'm a Supernatural. You know, I'm that dude who can go off the top of the dome and smoke you right on the spot. You know, I don't, you know, my moves aren't written.
Right.
How did the Red Bull deal come about, that sponsorship?
I was in Los Angeles at the time at a Trans World Media Group party that they were doing for the Osbournes. Yeah, and I met the CEO at the time, and dude was like, "Yo, how do we get that Lipton Brisk logo off your website?" And I'm like, "You can't. Like, I gotta honor my deal. Like, you want to hit me up in a few months? We could talk." They hit me up in a few months later, and there's a very deep story about that one that I'm saving for the documentary, but there was some bullshit going on because of someone else, and ended up finding out later on. But because that person tried to sabotage my shit, and they don't know that I know to this day, the way I responded to it, Red Bull was like, "Hey, you know, the way you responded to our questioning about that is the reason why we signed you, and we didn't sign the other person at all. And they were going to sign both of us."
Okay.
It's some bullshit. It's some real, you know, here's the thing. There are people who do dirt and do fucked up shit. But when you are doing dirt to the point of you're trying to take food off of a man's plate where they're trying to put, you know, where they have children, that's another kind of dirty. Because now that's a direct impact, you know, on someone's livelihood. So, you know, now I say that, you know, right now, I can't say too much more in this interview because I got, you know, I'm working right now on a documentary. Got 2 projects going on, actually a few. Working on documentary about the history of Latinos in hip hop. So me, Fat Joe, and Eve Rivera are getting together on that. And then we have the Rocksteady story from my perspective. You know, and so I can't do this interview too long because there's a lot of things that I'm going to address that are going to be in that documentary. So, you know, I don't want to fuck up my own project.
When can we expect to see that?
We are going, I would say right now is where the heavy dialogue is going on. It's current in terms of discussing production and who's funding and all this other stuff. I mean, the one with Fat Joe, greenlit already. The one that we already have amazing people who are going to be investing in it. But my thing is, they're great people, but they're not black or brown. So I'm putting together a third group of people that's only going to be black and brown, because I can't go out there and not pull people up at the same time. You know, when I do shit, I like to know that number one, everyone is talented enough, and number two, it's diverse. And whatever I could do to pick up black and brown people, I'm going to do it. And that's important to me. So there's a lane for investment there, but it has to be very specific on this one because the other area is already covered, you know? So, yeah.
Very dope. Hip hop turns 50 this year. What events, places, what you got planned? Yeah, what you got going?
Was it really? Was it really?
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode.
That is.
Where are you going to be at this year?
You know what? Hopefully I'll just be filming, man. I'm looking to do my festival in Puerto Rico, the PRS Fest in October. And then this company right here, the Elijah Project, they're from Rhode Island. And I go to Puerto Rico every month because I do relief efforts over there. And the relief efforts are based on people who have lost everything, you know, people or supporting people who are helping those who lost everything. So I go there every month with, you know, supporting farmers, economic development, education, things like that. You know, I'll go into the areas because, you know, there's some bullshit racism in Puerto Rico too. The colorism exists there, you know, so I'll go into the areas where it's like, yo, let's go help out the Black Puerto Ricans too, you know, because sometimes they're forgotten. So I'll go into those areas too. I'll go into the mountains or get supplies for some of the indigenous people, some of the Tainos who are still living that life, and make sure that they're not forgotten, because that's also controversial as well. So my thing is like, let's get these film projects going and continue the work on helping people. But we'll see. I mean, you know, man, when it comes to the 50th, I'm indifferent about it, you know, but I will celebrate it with an asterisk. You know, I will celebrate it without a doubt, because at the same time, it's not like we as a community came together and in a meaningful way that would lead to some sort of well thought out approach towards everyone's contribution with respect to perspective, geography, age, years, what is insanely impossible and what is actually, you know, a reality. So I think there's look, if we don't get together and do that sooner than later, 100 years from now, or even 50 years, when all of us are dead, when all of the pioneers are dead, someone else is going to cross-reference, and they're going to start doing all that math and geography and DNA. And they're going to be like, oh, that person lied, this person lied. That's not impossible. You know, I mean, that's not possible. So they're going to, I think a lot of people are going to find out a lot of things when a lot of us are gone, because a lot of emotions won't be involved. And then it's like, you know, you're going to realize like, oh shit, like there's more to every story that we're talking about. And I think the idea of any pioneer, contributor, whatever, just be, you know, kind of prefacing their story with, hey, as I remember, I could be wrong, I could be corrected, but this is how I remember it. If we work with that, that keeps everyone looking fresh, because there's no reason, if you're that dope and you've contributed in a way that inspired other people who even push the needle further, you're still going to be celebrated the same way. There's no reason to embellish anyone's contribution, you know. But then there are people who embellish hanging out just on the sidelines. Like, yo, dude, like, come on, man. You didn't do shit. You weren't really there. Like, you know, look at your age. If I shouldn't have been there and I was too young, and you're 5 years younger than me, you're a liar.
Right. We want to thank you, gentlemen, for the opportunity and everything you've done for the culture. Before we get out of here, can you guys shout out your social media where we can keep up with you at?
Yeah, man. Crazy Legs BX on Instagram, and Crazy Legs RSC on Twitch. And yeah, his is, what's your
Mr. Freeze 1970 on Instagram.
And then, you know, shout out to, you know, people like John Leguizamo. I was on his show, The Daily Show, the other day. Shout out to my homegirl, Janicia Garcia, who you know, who was probably like one of the first people to really have like a well thought out discussion about hip hop culture for the 50th. She's a Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx. She has a show called On the Block with Jen. Super cool. She's probably watching the show right now. But, you know, shout out to all those people who got my back. I mean, you know, a lot of people like to think that, like for me, I personally can easily say that I ain't shit without the people who support me. You know, in the entertainment game, I don't think anyone's shit, because you do have, you know, to a certain degree, you have to be validated by others, because that's your brand, that's your relevance, that's what you want. And I just want to shout out anyone who has had my back and anyone who has checked me. I think we all need to be checked too. So, right. Yeah.
Peace.
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. And shout out to Danny.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we appreciate your time on behalf of myself, Sincere, Mr. Freeze, and Crazy Legs. Thank you so much for your contributions to the hip hop community. It'll never be forgotten. Thank you for your time. Gentlemen, bless.
I appreciate you, man. Peace.
No doubt. Peace.